If you've ever ventured into the idea of gaining more ELO, then you might have considered studying a brand new opening. But I hope you didn't just memorize the lines just for the tricks, because that won't improve your actual playing strength. Today, we'll look at an opening weapon against d4, its common themes, strategic ideas, tactical weapons, and how to punish the opponent when they make a mistake. Oh, so quick opening review. We'll play this as black. White starts with d4. We play c5, which is the Benoni. To maintain central tension, the opponent pushes on d5, knight to f6, usually developing our knight, and c4 by the opponent, or knight to c3. Here, c4 is played. The themes are the same. d6, trying to attack e5, and after knight to c3, usually g6 is what I lean into. Idea is establishing some dominance and play in the dark square diagonals. So after e4, which is protected, and bishop to g7. All right, review over. Before I begin and before I forget, if you find this content helpful and somewhat watchable, please leave a like and subscribe. Let's get started. All right, first game using the Benoni, d4, c5, d5, g6. Instead of an early knight to f6, same idea here, different move order. e4 now, and now d6, clamping on e5, c4 by the opponent, bishop to g7 with a very nice control in the dark square diagonal. White has the center there on the light squares. Knight to f3 by the opponent, knight to f6, hitting on e4. Now, if you're new to the opening, you're probably thinking, why not just push? That doesn't work, because after takes, this is on line of fire, so you have an intermezzo there. And after takes, or takes with the queen, this drops. So white wins the pawn and early. So no. After knight to f6, knight to c3 defending, e4. Bishop to g4 by black is a common theme here. Thing is, moves like b6 could be a little slower, and you don't want to block your bishop. It turns into a bad bishop. This way, you can trade, take away the protector of e5, and then maybe play knight to d7. After h3 takes, queen takes, now knight b to d7. And here the opponent played bishop to f4, again overprotecting e5, and maybe later bishop to d3. As black, you can play castle, castle king, but here black plays queen to b6, and the opponent played this ugly move, b3. Blunder, complete blunder. Remember, after establishing bishop to g7, the dark square diagonal is where we're trying to establish dominance as black. So, in this position, that is pinned. So easily, we'll go through it. Simply takes. Now white could have defended with rook to b1, and after challenging the center with e6, bishop to e2, all is well. Or the more competitive queen to d3, protecting knight on c3, and say takes. It turns a little more open, a little more wild. Rook to b1, hitting on, of course, b7. After you sidestep, takes, and then castle. Now game is more open. Although the white king's still hanging out in the middle, there is a good degree of piece activity for white. But b3 was played. So the first sequence, in order of the sequence, is simply taking. And a quick calculation, as you can see, if queen takes, and you have a double hit, easy. Goodbye rook, of course. And after takes here, you're up the exchange. But of course, after white's blunder, white wants to redeem himself or herself and provides resistance with the move knight to a4, hitting the queen. This is en prise. This is en prise, but our queen is kind of pretty important, especially if we don't want to Bottas gambit it. So here we go. after the idea that the knight is taking over these squares, the rook is being hit, what is the brilliant move here for black? And I mean kind of the strongest continuation. Go ahead. Feel free to pause, solve, and comment on the video below. Answer in 3, 2, 1. The strongest continuation, if you found it. Congratulations. That's my congrats clap. Queen to a5 check. That's a brilliant move. If you block, of course, that's mate. If the king sidesteps, then king to d1. This is on prise, but that's on prise. So we hit. After queen takes, simply takes. And after attacking the queen, there is an escape square. Now the reason why the other move, queen to b4, is not as strong is because if you can notice, you can't move in an L. You need this exit square for when your queen gets hit. So say after queen to b4 and the opponent sidesteps, knight to f2, even though this is being hit, so queen takes, and your queen gets hit, you can't exit here, you can't exit there because your queen's on prise. So you go to queen to a3. After queen to c1, you'd have to give that up. So you're not really winning material here. You have to go back it. So yeah, no, that's super drawish. It's more of a positional win after queen to b4. You have to push f5. And if you're not quite at that level yet, this is mostly, if not a positional advantage. After rook to c1, a6, you have a lovely knight, a weak king in the middle. You're still winning here, but the conversion is much harder, so that's not the strongest move. Anyways, alright guys, second Benoni example starts with d4, knight to f6, c4, c5. We didn't start with the c5 idea, but the move order being different ends up being the same. d5 push, d6 clamping down on e5, knight to c3, g6 fianchetto, e4, bishop to g7. Again, with ideas and play on the dark squared diagonal, knight to f3, and your castle king, bishop to e2 for development for white. And here the opponent plays e6 instead of the bishop to g4 to prevent this bishop from being bad, you know. e6, just challenging the center immediately. Castle king, rook to e8, knight to d2. Now the idea when the opponents play these kind of maneuvers, these tings, is to push on f4, a pawn storm in the king side, and then control of e5. So knight to a6, idea of rerouting to c7, f4 like we predicted, and now here takes, opening up the file. And here as black we have ideas of knight to c7 or the more dynamic c4, which is a bit of a bait but is part of the variation. The opponent takes on bishop to c4. If you take, of course, with the knight, that leaves this piece on e4 hanging. That's a central pawn. You don't want to lose that, especially in classical games. Actually, you don't lose that in any game because that's your central pawn. After takes, rook takes, your center is busted, and yeah, advantage black by a pawn and a central square. So bishop takes on c4, and here you have ideas of planting your knight here, but of course this is an actual game played as black played the very forward-moving knight to g4. I want you guys to pay attention to the dark squared diagonal. Because of pushes on f4, and this is a commonality in many themes where you push f4 and your king hasn't moved yet, is that you've got a dark squared weakness. Also, this move serves the purpose of potentially pinning on e3. So you have to defend against that. One defense would be knight to f3, which is somewhat dubious. because you haven't moved your king. And you have a knight on f2 there aiming, so queen to b6. This is not what happened in the game, by the way. King to h1. And you have ideas of a fork there. Remove that defender first. And now fork. After takes. This is a pretty comfortable game for black. It's a quick reset. In the actual game, knight to g4 was played. And in this position, white plays queen to e2, which is the big honking blunder. And I want to tell you, it's not because of queen to b6, because the king just sidesteps. And so what? A big blunder is because even though the queen protects against the fork, it's not looking at the square anymore. And what does that mean? It means you now have two pieces in the attack with the move bishop to d4. You cannot defend that. So after this move, king to h1 was played by white. And here I want you guys to have a look at the position and please identify the next continuation, the strongest brilliant move. Go ahead. Feel free to pause, solve, and comment on the video below. Answer in 3, 2, 1. In this position, black sacrificed the knight. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. If king takes, of course, the only escape square is there. So queen to h4 handles that with queen to h4, checkmate, chef's kiss, insert. In this position, white can mitigate the losses with rook to f3. Again, ideas of blockage here, so you can just take, be done with it, be up a piece, have both the bishop, and have a comfortable game. However, if white refuses to lose a piece, or lose exchange, then it gets really interesting, because the knight is there. The bishop controls that. The king is in this square, boxed by himself. Bishop to g4, supporting, slicing through. Queen to d3. Now, queen to h4 again, threatening. And threatening mate. And this is actually mate in 9, game over. If you try to defend, that's checkmate. Any other losses or any other moves leads to losses. You can try to block with the queen, but that's just equally as bad. Anyways, you guys must be wondering, how does white defend against this? And there was just one square away from a proper defense, and that's queen to e1, eyeing this square. So none of this other stuff works. After that move, king to h1, this doesn't work anymore, honestly. Because 2 pieces for rook means white is up, and it's totally protected. Totally protected. So this stuff doesn't work anymore, right? This doesn't work. King takes. Queen can't go to that square. So your next best bet is knight to b4, or a nice insert. Sorry. Knight to c5. Anyways, that's how it's done. That's a checkmate. Hope you guys enjoyed that and got something out of the Benoni. I'll see you guys later. Double peace.